Welcome to Nature Calls, Conversations from the Hudson Valley. Our team's goal is to present science-based information about gardening and all things nature in New York's Hudson Valley. Our hosts are Master Gardener volunteers for the Cornell Cooperative Extension of Columbia and Greene counties, midpoint along the Hudson River Valley. So if you're interested in gardening or nature or just nuggets of information about what's happening outside your door, listen in and enjoy the conversation. Whatever the season, we'll always have something to talk about.
A little note before we begin this episode. We pulled this interview from our radio archives from before the COVID era, when our precursor, Digging In with Master Gardeners, was a radio show on station WGXC 90.7 FM. We think the material is timely and appropriate, so with the permission of the radio station, we've edited the interview to fit our podcast format and are presenting it again for your listening pleasure. The topic for this segment is pollinators. And with us is Tim Kennelty, a fellow Master Gardener. Tim is also a Master Naturalist and serves on the Board of Trustees of the Columbia Land Conservancy. Tim has gardened in Columbia County for over 25 years and has developed a passion for preserving native species and combating exotic invasive plants. Currently, he's involved in a multi-year habitat restoration project in Ghent, New York. Welcome, Tim. That's quite a resume.
Thank you, Jean. It's great to be here.
Okay, so I can assume that your expertise in pollinators is a natural progression. If you're interested in preserving native plant species, you need to know their requirements to thrive, as well as the needs of the insects and animals that are their partners in the survival dance.
Yeah, that's really true. I mean, if the two things go hand in hand, if you're really interested in planting natives and making sure that you eliminate or reducing invasive species, what you're really doing is preserving ecosystems and preserving areas in a habitat that really will support pollinators and birds and really, kind of all the fauna out there.
Now, I have a note here about attracting native pollinators from the Xerxes Society. Could you tell us a little more about that?
Well, the Xerxes Society is a really good group that they produce books and I think videos as well. And their mission is to preserve pollinators through education, and they get grants. But there's some very, very good literature and books, and I think you can be. I'm a member. Their website has a lot of information as well. So they really focus on pollinators.
Okay, let's start with some definitions. What do we mean when we talk about pollinators? You and I talk about them all the time, and we know what we mean, but the listener doesn't necessarily.
We do talk about them all the time. There are bat and bird pollinators, but the vast majority of pollinators in North America are insects, and really all we are talking about is an insect that goes to a flower usually to consume pollen or to consume nectar, or some of them go to mate at a flower. And what happens is they get pollen grains stuck on their legs usually, and some are kind of more equipped to do this than others. And when they go from flower to flower, they basically leave those pollen grains, and it basically fertilizes the flower, and the flower then produces seeds. There's really 4 types of insect pollinators. There are bees and wasps, butterflies and moths, some types of flies are pollinators, and then there are also beetles that are pollinators.
Let's review the elephant in the room. Why do we care about bugs, insects?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's lots of different reasons. First of all, the insects are really kind of a harbinger of like how good the environment is, but insects are essentially kind of the bottom of the food chain. So everybody eats insects. Birds eat insects. In fact, songbirds feed their young pretty much exclusively insects. And so if insects are on the decline, which they are, it's an indication that the whole food chain is on the decline. So they're really, really important. And of course, the plants that you have in your garden, the plants that are out there in the woods, etc., that are native support those insects.
Okay, so climate change is going to mess a bunch of that up, right?
Well, habitat loss and climate change, really. Okay. So there's habitat loss, there's habitat fragmentation. When, two parcels of land there's development in the middle of it, so you have less and less animals going from one place to another. There's habitat degradation. That usually happens from invasives. All of that is really detrimental to pollinators. But then climate change is kind of an additional factor. And what's happening with climate change, one of the major things is that plants geographically are blooming at different times, so they're starting to be out of sync with the insects that are pollinating them. So a lot of kind of negative things happening out there. And as I said, there's a decline in insect populations. About 40% of our insect populations are on steep decline. So it's pretty severe things going on out there as far as pollinators.
Okay, so we've reviewed some of the big picture issues. Let's start with some particular insect pollinators. As you said, there are beetles and even flies that are good pollinators. And I just read that mosquitoes and ants do their part too. What about bees? I know my garden's happiest when it's humming.
Yeah, bees are pretty much the most important pollinators out there because, they're really good at it because most bees have hairs along their legs that almost act as Velcro that pick up the pollen grains. And so when they go from flower to flower, they're very effective pollinators. And
of course, the honeybees are manipulable. You can just move them around in big boxes and put them to work in commercial operations.
I like the word manipulable, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, honeybees have been used in commercial agriculture for a long time, and it's because you're absolutely right. They're basically transportable, but also they're in colonies. Most bees aren't in colonies, so there are large numbers of female bees, honeybees, that do the pollination. So they've been a very, very effective means of pollinating agricultural crops. They're from Europe. They're not native, but they have been used very effectively in commercial agriculture.
Okay, if honeybees aren't native, what bees are? And how many kinds are there in our area?
Yeah, there's lots and lots of native bees. In North America, there's almost 4,000 different species of native bees. Around us, we probably have several hundred different types of native bees. And I think that kind of misconception that most people have is they think of bees that are very communal and they're in a hive and they're swarming. There's lots of bees in a particular area, but the fact of the matter is 90% of native bees are what we would call solitary, so a single male and a single female, and they're not generally all in one big hive. Generally what happens is about 70% of them are nesting in the ground, and about 30%, the other 30% or so, nest in the stems of plants. So not really what most people think in terms of native bees.
Are they all pollinators?
Yeah, most bees are pollinators, and I think there may be some exceptions. I think the difference that you see among bees is, again, the thing that's just so awesome about nature is that bees have co-evolved with flowers. So there are some bees that have, very particular mouth parts, and some are very effective at pollinating like very deep flowers, like tubular flowers. And then some are generalists. They'll go to just about any flower. They're not very picky. So it really depends on the bee in terms of what flower it will go to, but most of them are pollinators.
Okay, my 10-year-old self wants to know, aren't they dangerous? Don't they all have stingers?
Oh, Jean, come on. You're afraid of everything. No, many of my gardening friends and non-gardening friends are afraid of bees. In fact, I had a friend who asked me about some flower species that she wanted to put in her garden, but she said, just no bees. Well, that's kind of hard to do. Most bees, for the wide majority of bees, are not a danger to you at all. In fact, for most bees, the only time they're really in danger of stinging you is if they're protecting their nest. So if they're out foraging, if they're out consuming nectar, that's really what they're focusing on, and they won't sting you. The only time they're really going to sting you is when you're in their area of their nest or something like that. And most bees' stingers won't even penetrate human flesh. Most of the species won't penetrate human flesh. Of course, if you get stung, honeybees are the only bees that the stinger will stick in you. You want to pull that out if you get stung. Most people have a very mild reaction. If you do have any kind of shortness of breath or nausea or vomiting or dizziness, you want to seek medical attention. But for the most part, it's a misconception that bees are out there to get you. They're not really very dangerous unless you're threatening their nest. And again, the ones that are you're in most in danger of are wasps and hornets and yellow jackets, because they are communal and they do have, you'll see those paper nests. And so if you're batting that paper nest on the eve of your house, you're probably asking for it.
And you also shouldn't dry your laundry outdoors, or if you do, you should shake it out very thoroughly when you bring it back inside. I've got stories.
It's like hints from Eloise with you.
Just hints from hell. Wasps and bees are close relatives.
They are, yes.
Okay, and hornets and paper wasps. That's pretty much it. The nests they make are out of paper, and the bees are made out of wax.
Wasps and bees are closely related. That is true. One of the big differences between wasps and bees is wasps are, in some stages of their life, meat eaters. At the larva stage, once the egg has hatched and they're in the larva stage, the female bees will have to bring their larva children protein. So they're bringing little pieces of meat from animal carcasses, or maybe they're in your picnic and they're stealing a little bit of meat from your hot dog, but they actually need that meat to survive. And then when those larvae turn into adult bees, hornets, when they turn into adult hornets or wasps or yellow jackets, they're only consuming sugar. So they would be at flowers for nectar, or they would be, a lot of times you'll see yellow jackets or hornets or wasps under a fruit tree when there's kind of rotting fruit. I see many yellow jackets under my plum tree when the fruit is rotting, or maybe even at your picnic on a soda can or something like that. The other difference that you might see physically between wasps and bees is that wasps have kind of stouter bodies. A lot of them have that distinctive kind of yellow and black striping. So, there's a little bit of difference in size, but they are very closely related. Many wasps are more communal too. They'll have nests. So there's, multiple females and multiple males in their nests. And again, we talked about they have those kind of papery nests that you'll see under the eaves of houses or kind of hanging from trees. But those are the basic differences.
Thank you, Tim. We're so grateful you were able to join us today.
Great to be here.
That concludes another episode of Nature Calls, Conversations from the Hudson Valley. We would like to thank Xandra Powers and Devin Connolly from the Cornell Cooperative Extension of Columbia and Greene Counties for production support. And a special thanks to our listeners for joining us on this episode of Nature Calls, Conversations from the Hudson Valley. You can find links to any of the topics mentioned in this episode at our website at ccecolumbiagreene.org. Comments and suggestions for future topics may be directed to us at columbiagreenemgv@cornell.edu or on the CCE Master Gardener Volunteers of Columbia and Greene Facebook page. For more information about CCE of Columbia and Greene, visit our website or visit in person during business hours at our campuses in Hudson or Acra.
Cornell Cooperative Extension provides equal program and employment opportunities in accordance with applicable laws.